Welcome, everybody. This is my review and analysis of Star Trek Picard, Episode 2, the episode entitled Maps and Legends. Okay, well, we enter Episode 2 after, I thought, a pretty good, decent opening episode. And this episode opens up on the Utopia Planitia shipyards 14 years ago, so we're getting flashbacks. And I think we'll be getting more of these flashbacks as the series progresses, filling in some of the backstory that we didn't see really in episode 1 to try to fill in some of those holes. So this is going to fill in the storyline with the sense, what's happened with them, how did the attack on Utopia Planitia come about. So we open up this episode where we get a worker going in and bringing these synths out for their everyday duties. And you'll notice this one has an F8 on his head, and we get it, F8 fate. So this will be the synth that brings upon the fate of what's going to be happening here on Utopia Planitia for the attack. This guy doesn't really seem to be all that enthralled with these synths, so it's setting up this disdain that these workers feel toward these synthetic humans. It's not really yet established in the series exactly what Starfleet is doing with these guys. I guess they're using them as workers, which is something I didn't think that Starfleet would really get involved in, especially after the episode of The Next Generation, where we had Data going to trial and fulfilling, his rights as a sentient being. I looked at the end of that episode where Starfleet, had that all wrapped up as far as where they stood. This is 25, 30 years later. Things have obviously changed. And we get a shot in the outside of Utopia Planitia and Mars. Once again, we're getting these very Discovery level assets for the ships. We're getting these reused shuttles from the Discovery era, as opposed to things that really look more in line with the Next Generation. I guess we have to kind of overlook that as the possibility that the Dominion War and events have kind of decimated Starfleet's fleet, so we can kind of overlook this a little bit. But I do wish we would see more era-specific vessels in the show, and maybe we will once it gets out into space. So we get the inside of the building here in the inside, and we get to see some of these workers going about their duties and working with these synthetics. This guy here gets to relate to a joke, very Data-esque, that these guys are telling. And these workers are all very, if you didn't know this was supposed to be the 24th century on Star Trek, you could say this was The Expanse, Blade Runner, any kind of science fiction show, because it really doesn't smack Star Trek. These guys are all cracking wise with very non-PC jokes, talking about sticky food. A couple of these guys come out and say, hey, this dude is creepy, this dude creeps me out. This food, this dude's lucky he doesn't eat this food. Stuff that we wouldn't expect to see 400 years in the future. It all feels very 20th century and kind of leads to what I'm having a problem with in this series so far, is that the producers don't really even attempt to try to make this feel like it's 400 years in the future. I know everybody's saying, well, sometimes that comes off as cheesy, and some of the stuff on The Next Generation would be maybe a little dated, but at least they tried to try to give it a spin that makes it feel like we're in the future, especially Star Trek's future, which is supposed to be a little bit more optimistic. Of course, we never really saw things from the workers level, but I kind of just wish they would spruce up this part of the show. And this is a big example of it. I mean, during the scene, we're seeing the workers eat their meals, and this is a meal being materialized in a replicator. That's clearly a 20th century 3D printer that's been repurposed. Anybody that knows anything about computers and technology of the 20th century would automatically say, "Hey, that's a 3D printer." It's this kind of sloppy production that really drags Picard down so far. The story, the acting, and everything is pretty top. At least so far is good. But when we see stuff like this, excuse me, when we see stuff like this, it just brings the fact that the producers aren't really even trying here. So the synth here, F8, goes about his business, and obviously he's going to be doing something that's going to start this whole catastrophe in motion. And that looks like it's going to be a repositioning of a satellite that's going to knock out the defenses that will allow this attack to happen, which is good because we really didn't see, why these rogue synths would be able to carry out this this plan, and now we're seeing why they were able to do that. So he starts going ballistic and killing everybody that's inside this control room, and then ultimately takes himself out. And once we see the F8 again, fate, right before he does it. Now we go from there to Picard's vineyard, and Yaris is trying to determine exactly what happened. So they're looking at the footage of Picard's and Dahj's attack by the Romulan forces, and it's brought to light that little of Dahj's involvement is seen here. That the footage has been scrubbed to remove her, and they're talking about how the Tal Shiar, the Romulan secret police, could have done this. But Yaris goes, this goes deeper than the secret police. This goes into a group that stands behind the secret police known as the Zhat Vash. More of a legend in Romulan circles, but Yaris being an operative with the Tal Shiar, which was determined in the Countdown comic series, knows about their involvement. And it's discussed that the Zhat Vash does not care for, in fact, they have a disdain and a hatred for all things synthetic. That Romulan culture doesn't even allow for synthetics, androids, cybernetic advancements. And once again, this is the producers not doing their homework. If the TNG fan remembers in an episode called The Defector, where Picard and crew come upon a Romulan that wants to defect from the Empire, he discusses with Data in that episode about Romulan cybernetic scientists. So we know that what they're saying here doesn't really have a background on the show. I guess you could say that, because Romulans lie in all things, that could have been a deceit. But still, this once again shows that they still haven't quite done their homework for the plot here. So Yaris and Picard beam over to Dahj's apartment, and they find that the Romulans have basically scrubbed the apartment. It's completely clean. No traces of the attack or the struggle is left. And they're looking for evidence. They're looking for proof. So Yaris brings out this Romulan forensic device that kind of has a way of looking back in time, or looking back through what's the molecules in the apartment. It's a little far-fetched. Even Picard says this is dubious, this is banned in the Federation. And they eventually see a portion of what happened to lead them to believe Dahj's events of the story. They get into Dahj's computer files and find trace records that the Romulans were not able to scrub, and that the sister that Dahj has been in communication with her. And Yaz figures out that this communication has come from off-world. So Picard knows instantly at that point that wherever this mission is going to take him is going to be not on Earth. And meanwhile, we go back to the Borg cube that's located somewhere. I'm not sure exactly why this huge Borg cube could go undetected while the Romulans and others go, do this nefarious plan they have, whatever it is. And we find that basically this Romulan, Navak, is shagging Dahj's sister, Soji. And that's part of his grand plan to to get involved with her to find out what she knows. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Picard welcomes a friend of his from the Stargazer, the doctor that used to serve on board, who sits down with Picard because Picard wants to be allowed to go back into space, and he has to be cleared by Starfleet to do this. Picard at this point finds out from the doctor that Picard has some sort of problem in his temporal lobe that is going to cause issues and possibly dementia and all sorts of things. It's going to lead ultimately to Picard's death. And this is the whole Professor Xing of Picard here. As Professor X had his mental abilities deteriorate, which would cause, possible world destruction, Picard is going to have this happen to him that's going to ultimately lead to his death. And the doctor argues, do you want to die in the coldness of space? And Picard says, now more than ever, I want to get back out into space and take up this mission and live my life. And of course, on Star Trek The Next Generation, this goes back to the diagnosis by Beverly Crusher in the last episode of The Next Generation, where in the future, Picard has the possibility of getting this aromatic syndrome, which would lead to some of the stuff we're seeing here. That was a possible future because that was kind of an alternate timeline, but we're seeing that some of this is coming to pass. And Picard deals with this and says, now, yes, I want to go back into space. So Picard enters Starfleet headquarters, and we get some holograms of past Starfleet vessels, and we do see here, once again, that this is not the Enterprise from the Prime timeline, although this is supposed to be happening in Prime timeline. This is a Discovery-verse Enterprise. Now, I love the Discovery-verse Enterprise. I think they did a heck of a job reimagining it, but I still would have liked to seen the original ship that we all know and love from the original series. And we also see the Enterprise D, which is Picard's ship, and that's looking more or less like what it looked like in the show, so I'm happy to see that that looks about the same. Picard goes up to the young man staffing the desk, says, I'm here to meet and have a meeting with the Admiral. And this guy doesn't really know who Picard is until he looks it up. So that's kind of a cute scene, and we get Picard getting his visitor pass. Now the next scene's a little bit more controversial. He sits down with the Admiral, and this Admiral is a dick. But of course, most admirals in Starfleet on Star Trek are kind of dicks. So this kind of goes along with that pattern. And she's reiterating that, Picard left Starfleet. He had a chance to stay and he left. And Picard tells her of everything he's found out so far, possible rogue elements of Romulans working on Earth, Bruce Maddox and the synths working in the background for some kind of nefarious possible reasoning. And this is where we get the Admiral dropping the F-bomb. And once again, I don't really feel it was necessary in this scene. They did it and it kind of stood out as, hey, look, we're on a streaming platform. We can drop an F-bomb now. They've done it in Discovery. On Discovery, it felt totally out of place because it was Tilly just randomly dropping it. Hey, F this. Well, this is effing cool. Here, at least, it's a little bit more in context. This Admiral is pissed at Picard. So when she drops the F-bomb, I can kind of even see that this, at least it fits in with the scene, but I don't think it was necessary. We saw in Star Trek 4 that not everybody swears like they used to do in the 20th century, the double dumbass on you comment from Kirk and Spock. It was quaint to them, but it's happening more and more in this series. I guess you could say it's making this new series feel a little bit more real, a little bit more grounded, but I don't think it's really necessary. So this Admiral basically tells Picard to go, take a short walk off a long pier and says, denied. You're not getting anywhere near space. We don't believe you. Go back to your vineyard. Go hide like you're used to doing. So back on the Borg cube, we get this scene with the one of the Romulan overseers. This is a nice little scene here where it says this facility has gone this many days without a assimilation. So that's a little cute attention to detail. And they're listening to this Romulan. We get various scenes back and forth between Daj and co-workers. And we find out that they are trying to reclaim past Borg. They're taking off all the implants. They're trying to bring them back to who they were. We don't know why, but that's going on at a pretty good pace. Back on Picard's vineyard, he meets with the doctor here that he met with at the Daystrom Institute, and they talk about Bruce Maddox. They talk about what's going on with Daj and the possible sister, and that they need to go out and investigate some of this information. And here we see once again Soji working with the Romulans to reclaim these past Borg. She doesn't like the fact that they're called nameless people by the Romulans, and we get a little hint that Navarik, the English Romulan, is falling in love with her for some of her sentiments, that his mission, whatever it is being compromised. And there's some gruesome stuff in here as some of the ocular implants are removed. It's kind of cool. It's kind of a little bit more severe than what it was on the Next Generation, but probably more realistic in line of what it would look like if some of these compromised life forms are trying to be converted back to what they were before they were assimilated. So back at Picard's vineyard, Picard decides that he needs to hire a ship and get a crew and take on this mission to find Soji. Digs out his old comm badge, which is stuck in a box at his desk, and he plans on contacting a former crewmate of his ship, and that crewmate's name is Raffi. And it's here even that we get a little bit of colloquialism from the 20th century. Picard, when contacting Raffi, says, "Raffi, don't hang up." She's not on a phone, she's on a comm badge. I know it's nitpicking, but it's stuff like this that kind of pulls you out of the moment and pulls you out of the idea that you're in the 24th century 400 years in the future. So we go from there back to Starfleet headquarters. This Commodore's name is Commodore O. We're assuming she's a Vulcan, but I have a feeling she's a Romulan. And she's talking to Admiral Clancy about Picard's visit, and that Clancy discouraged him, and she feels he's not going to be a problem in the future. Now, we don't get the idea that Clancy's involved in whatever's going on here, that she's just, as I said before, kind of a dick. And from there we go back into the vineyard. Picard tells Yaris that he's going to take up this mission. He needs a crew. She tries to persuade him, saying this is really a dumb idea. You don't want to go back in space at your age. But of course, he wins out. And he talks to his other person. I forget the name of this gentleman, but it's it's his husband, their ex-Tal Shiar, and he's going to have him oversee what's going on at the vineyard while he's gone. Now, back at Starfleet headquarters, we meet Ensign Rizzo. We find out, corresponding back and forth with Navarik on the Borg Reclamation Cube. Some sinister plans are going on, that these guys are in league with each other. So we get the idea that this is a secret Romulan plot. We find out later on that Rizzo's been altered to look human when she's really Romulan. So I'm assuming that Commodore O is also Romulan, and she's involved in some of the nefarious dealings and going on. Back with Picard, he tracked down Raffi, and Raffi's living out in the desert. And, of course, Picard brings a vintage bottle of his best along to try to convince her that he needs a ship, he needs a crew. Raffi's living kind of Jim Rockford style in the desert. And once again, this really doesn't scream 24th century to me. She's kind of in a beat-up, it looks almost like a cargo container. And her whole dress and demeanor, in fact, she's smoking, she's vaping, because we find out, I believe, she's addicted to certain drugs when her life went bad after Starfleet kicked her out because of what Picard did, and him resigning kind of forced her out. So she's very bitter over all this, and she spent her last 14 years addicted to various things. That even, to me, Roddenberry kind of really downplayed the whole idea that the 24th century, they were evolved enough to not really deal with drugs. Now, of course, we know people are going to fall down in their lives and get addicted to certain things. But I would have liked to see more of a spin on this than we're seeing here. It's very 20th century, and once again, doesn't smack of 400 years in the future. So Picard talks to her about what's going on. She says she will help them, but she wants him to leave. Once she helps him, she wants nothing to do with him any longer. Back on the cube, we do get Rizzo as a hologram meeting with Navarik. And, she's kind of getting the idea, she sees the bed and the state that it's in, that he's getting more involved with her, with Soji than the plan requires. In fact, she says, if you're unable to get the information we need out of the machine, referring to Soji as the machine, which he is an organic machine, I guess, then we'll go to plan B, basically. And we get no love lost between these two. In fact, we get the idea here that Navarik is going to ultimately switch allegiances, or at least be very conflicted in what he's doing. And it's there the show. This episode ends. So just a little commentary on this episode. I didn't think it was quite as good as episode 1. Of course, episode 1 kind of started the whole world building here for Picard. We did get a lot of information. I liked a lot of the almost CSI feeling when they were investigating the whole thing in Dodger's apartment. I love that scene. Any of the scenes where Yaris is with Picard, the actress playing Yaris is fantastic. I don't like the fact that she has an Irish accent. It doesn't make too much sense why she would, but the character's good. Her chemistry with Picard is fantastic. I'd like to see more scenes together with these two. I almost wish it was her going with Picard instead of some of the people he's taking with him. But those scenes were fantastic. I thought some of the scenes with the Admiral and the Commodore weren't the best. I didn't like the whole dropping of the expletive. But I kind of liked where that went. It built up some of the plot that's going on behind the scenes. And then some of the Borg stuff, didn't really give us a lot, didn't advance the story a lot. We did get to see that Navarek is falling in love with Soji and that they're working for some reason to reclaim all these ex-Borg. We don't know why yet. And really that's it. We get a little bit with Picard's former crewmate Raffi and the fact that in the next episode coming up, Picard is finally going to get the crew together, get his ship together, and get out into space. And really feel that this series needs to get into space. It was kind of said that these first 3 episodes were the pilot, that together these formed the pilot. And I think it's moving a little bit slow. We'll see where the next episode takes it before they do eventually, hopefully, get into space on the next episode when we get to our episode 3 review. So I hope you've all liked my analysis, my review of episode 2, Maps and Legends of Star Trek Picard, and I hope you'll come back for the next episode review when I drop that in about a week or so. So once again, if you like what you've seen here, please comment in the area below. Let me know what you'd like to see if you want to see more episode reviews. I am going to be trying to branch out and do a little bit more. I'm a big, huge Batman fan, so I will be covering some of the other things going on besides Star Trek. This will be probably some Batman comic reviews. But if you like what you're seeing here, definitely like, subscribe, and share this video. And once again, I want to thank you for taking your time and watching this video and watching and supporting the channel. So once again, as we always say here, keep reading and most certainly keep on trekking.